Number 1. This incident happened about 7 to 8 months ago. I was the night shift desk clerk at a hotel, and let's just say that there was a steady stream of creepers that passed through the lobby. I've had a ton of uncomfortable situations throughout my 3 years of employment there, but this guy terrified me. It was around 2 a.m. when the guy walked in the lobby. The first thing I noticed was that he smelled god-awful, like burning plastic or something. I shrugged it off because at the time, a lot of contractors were in the area working on a chemical plant. I just assumed he was a worker looking for a quick nap and a hot breakfast. The morning comes and my shift ends. Fast forward to my next shift the following night. The smelly man from the night before left all of his belongings in his room and was nowhere to be found. He only paid for one night, so the housekeepers had to move his things to a storage room so they could prepare the room for the next guest. Around 8:30 p.m., I get a call from a police officer. Apparently, he was a wanted fugitive because he nearly beat his wife to death just 2 hours before he checked in. I informed them of the items he left in the hotel room. I get the whole "do not engage, he is a dangerous and violent offender" speech, and I am officially scared. They said it was unlikely he would be back, but to excuse myself politely and call them if he showed up. Well, needless to say, he ended up back in the lobby not even 30 minutes later. He wanted the luggage he left. At this point, I'm doing whatever it takes not to show fear because I was fully aware of what this guy was capable of. I tried to play it off like I didn't know where his things were stashed so I could make an excuse to go upstairs and call the police. I'm not sure where they are. Let me go take a peek in a few of the storage units upstairs. If you could wait in the lobby, I'll just be a moment. He didn't say a word, so I assumed he was fine with that, and I started walking up the stairs. Halfway up, I realized he's following me. It was at this moment that I started to flip out internally. I had no idea what to do, so I began to fake search through a few different closets. After about 10 minutes of this, he started getting hostile.
"Where's my stuff? I need my things now. I need to go."
And boom! There goes his fist through the wall. At this point, there was enough distance between us that I felt comfortable enough to make a run for it. Fumbling with my MasterCard, I managed to lock myself in the closest vacant room. He banged on the door a few times, but left shortly after. The cops came about 20 minutes later, but he's gone. They search his bags and find a cache of meth and drug paraphernalia, which explained the awful scent and his determination to follow my every step. I quit shortly after, still unsure if they ever found him. Number 2. This story is something that happened to my aunt and her friends when she was a teenager. She didn't say when exactly, but it was likely sometime in the late 1970s. She, her 2 friends, and her best friend's boyfriend had all planned to go on an overnight drive from Calgary to Kamloops. She said that they all thought the idea of riding through the mountains from dusk until dawn was an incredibly exciting idea. It was about a 6-hour drive, so they left later in the day when the sun was starting to go down. Gas stations were few and far between on this particular road, and they still are to this day. So by the time they made their first pit stop, it was pitch black out, and they were about a third of the way through the planned drive. She told me that she waited in the car while her friend's boyfriend, who was driving, filled up the tank and everyone else was in the shop. There was a pickup truck at the pump next to them with a middle-aged looking guy filling up the tank. She didn't notice until the boyfriend went inside to pay for the gas because she was reading, but the man with the pickup truck was staring straight at her. When she noticed and made eye contact, he smiled at her and moved as if he was about to come over. She said that there wasn't anything particularly threatening about him at the time, but it was at night time. No one else was out at the pumps now, and all of her friends were inside. So she climbed out the other side of the car, walked around, and speed walked to the shop to join everyone else. She didn't say anything about it, since it wasn't really anything of note, and just walked around the store pretending to look around until everyone else was ready to head back to the car. When they all left, they passed the middle-aged guy in the parking lot as he himself headed into the shop. My aunt got into the car on her normal side as one of the friends walked around to the other side and realized that she had left it wide open when she went into the shop. Not only that, but she noticed that everything that she had had on the floor by her seat, her book, her water bottle, her purse, all of it was gone. It was right around then when she said she heard the pickup truck's door slam beside them, and then it sped off. She got back out of the car and started yelling after the man in the truck, but he just kept going. She then explained to everyone what happened, and they all agreed to go back into the store and call the police. There wasn't much that could be done, since they didn't get a license plate, and it was literally out in the middle of nowhere. But the police for that area said that they would keep a lookout for any trucks matching the same description. Since they all had come this far, my aunt said that they all had decided to just keep going. She wasn't working at the time, and hence didn't have anything in the purse except for makeup and female hygiene products. This is where things really took a turn for the creepy. A while into their drive, she said that a vehicle pulled in off a side road behind them and continued driving behind them, matching their speed. There weren't many exits on this highway, so it wasn't exactly unusual, but they were driving at a leisurely pace and gave them every opportunity to pass them. My aunt said that she started to get a bit paranoid at this point and started looking back. She couldn't make out any details on the vehicle right away because of the glare of the headlights, but when the road started to curve and the vehicle moved to keep inside the same lane as them, she was able to make out that it was the exact same pickup truck that had been next to them at the pit stop. She told everyone right away, and one of her friends, the one whose boyfriend was driving, started completely freaking out in the front seat. My aunt said that her boyfriend leaned over and grabbed a flashlight from the glove box, handed it to my aunt's other friend who was sitting next to her in the back, and told him to shine it at the front of the truck and start taking down the license plate number. She said that the truck began swerving at that point, either being blinded by the flashlight or catching on to what they were doing, but the friend still managed to get down the license plate number, and as soon as they had the chance, the boyfriend that was driving took a sharp turn onto a side road and started speeding up. After multiple turns, making almost a whole loop, they finally lost him. My aunt said that she thought maybe the pickup was too wide to fit down that path. They had no idea how far the next pit stop was, so they decided to drive back to the last one they were at and give the information to the police. She said that they ended up waiting around for quite some time for it to start to get lighter out before continuing the rest of their drive. A few days after their road trip, the police got a hit on the license plate number. Apparently, the middle-aged man driving the pickup truck was facing 2 separate rape allegations, one of them from his own wife. My aunt never found out whether or not the man was charged, and she never saw that purse again. But I think that she probably just feels lucky that she didn't end up being that creep's 3rd rape victim. She said that she shudders to think what might have happened if she hadn't gotten out of the car and gone into the shop to join her friends. Number 3. So this happened to me when I was in the 7th grade. I lived about half an hour away from an indoor ice skating rink that I would go to almost every weekend, but I had taken a break from it for about a month and a half at this point. This particular weekend happened to be Super Bowl Sunday. My mom and I thought, great, we'll go to the ice rink. There'll be no one there because everyone will be watching the game. I called up my best friend, and my mom drove us there together. But boy, were we wrong. The place was the most packed I'd ever seen it. Swarms of people crowded both the area by the restaurant and the skate rental booth, as well as in both of the rinks that were open to the public. From outside, you couldn't even see the ice, except for a couple of meters in the middle, which were combed off for ice skating lessons. My friend and I waited for half an hour, at my mom's suggestion, for the place to clear out a bit. Eventually, it did clear enough so that it didn't quite look like a death trap anymore. We decided that it was safe for us to go out on the ice then. My mom stayed in the metal bleachers to watch us through the window while my friend and I ventured out toward the entrance of the rink. The Zamboni had just been out, so the ice was still incredibly slick. It took a few minutes of stumbling by the wall, but we finally found our balance and were soon zipping around the inner ring with confidence. The trouble came when my friend and I decided to have a race. The rink was much less crowded at this point, so we figured it was okay, since if anyone fell in front of us, we had enough space to swerve to avoid them. We also agreed not to go recklessly fast, in other words, not to go too fast to turn safely at any given moment. It was still a pretty dumb idea. Racing in a public rink is always dangerous, and I'm definitely not condoning it. So we started our race at the entrance. We agreed to 3 laps, also ending at the entrance. We got 1 lap in, and I was near the entrance, stuck behind a group of small children, while my friend was ahead of me. I wasn't very worried because I knew I would catch up to her on the turns. Hers were wide, while mine were sharp, once I passed the group. The group of kids was hugging the wall, so I started to move away from it and closer to the center of the rink. Big mistake. The next part of this happened very fast, and my friend didn't see any of it as she was up ahead of me. Just as I was out of reach of the wall, I felt a man much bigger than me grip my shoulders. He was putting quite a bit of his weight on me, and I figured he was losing his balance and instinctively grabbed onto the nearest thing to steady himself. I was pretty tall for a 7th grade girl, 5 foot 6 inches, and I've always had great balance, but this guy was too heavy for me. I began to lose my balance and started getting a bit scared. I was mostly worried I would hurt the kids if I fell in the wrong way. I remember I squeaked out a "let go" and tried to shake him off, but the guy didn't budge. Looking back, this was a huge red flag, but at the time, I figured the guy was scared of falling. Unfortunately, I was losing my balance quickly, and I didn't have time to explain to him that him falling alone would be a lot less dangerous than both of us falling together. Thinking fast, I figured the wall was my best bet. There was a rest pit very close to us where I could get a good grip on the rail. I started moving toward it, not easy to do when you also have to push all your weight back to counteract someone twice your size leaning on you. Pretty soon, I realized there was no way I was going to make it. The best I could do now was to let myself fall and try to control how it happened. As all skaters learn from a young age, the best way to fall is backward on your butt, but barring that, a close second is forward on your knees and palms, fingers facing in. However, the guy grabbing my shoulders is behind me and the kids are in front of me. Although at this point, I was pretty angry at the guy and would have had no qualms falling on him. I couldn't do that. He was wearing hockey skates. The blade is extremely sharp all around, so I couldn't risk cutting myself. Finally, I decided I was going to have to fall on my side. I tried yelling at him one more time, "I'm going to fall!" But he said nothing and kept pushing on me. That's what it was, pushing! I only realized that in that moment as I was falling. I anxiously awaited the second thud of the guy's body hitting the ice, which would prove he hadn't intended to push me down, but it didn't come. Immediately, I felt scared. I pulled all my limbs in as close as I could, but the position I had fallen in had me on top of one arm awkwardly, and I couldn't pull my right hand in all the way. I swiped it toward myself as quickly as I could, and thank God I did. Not a moment later, the same man, I never saw his face, but I recognized his skates, skated over where my wrist would have been. Instead, his hockey skate blades nicked the tip of my pinky finger. There was a lot of blood and crying, but my friend realized what had happened pretty quickly and called over one of the employees to help. One hand surgery, and several months later, no one could even tell it happened unless I pointed it out. I told my mom and my friends that I thought the guy was really shady and that he might have hurt me on purpose, but for the most part, they and I shrugged it off. As soon as it happened, I pointed out the guy, but he disappeared in the pandemonium. Everyone in the rink at the time was looking at me, the crying, bleeding girl, and not listening to what I was trying to blabber out between sobs. The creepiest part of this story is that several years later, when I was in high school, I wrote a story about this for a creative writing class, and one of my classmates said it sounded eerily familiar to something that had happened to his also female friend. It was at a different ice rink, outdoor, and about an hour away, but once he told me the story, I knew it was the same guy. He said that the guy pushed his friend down in much the same way I described. He also said he was wearing hockey skates and that she grabbed the wall and fell forward on her knees almost immediately. Her hands never touched the ice, and he skated right past her. I still love ice skating as a hobby, and this incident hasn't stopped me, only made me more aware of what to be careful of. Number 4. This happened when I was about 12 years old. I was in year 8. I'm guessing that is the same as 8th grade in America. Anyway, I was on my way home from school with my friend Kira. Kira was really small and had very childlike features. She was also extremely timid and easily scared. We decided to take a quick detour to the local supermarket for a drink and some snacks. Although this was frightening at the time, I am glad I made that detour, and you will understand why very soon. We got into the shop and went straight to the sweets aisle. It was fairly empty. There was only me, Kira, and a young Muslim girl who stood staring at all the variety of sweets. She was smaller than Kira, and like I said, Kira was small. If I had to put an age on this girl, I would say she was about 7 or 8. I couldn't see her parents, but just assumed they had told her to choose some sweets and then return to them. I am a very observant person, naturally, and will instantly react if I see someone in danger or figure out what to do if I notice anything suspicious. As we were browsing for sweets, I noticed in the corner of my eye a man stood at the bottom of the aisle, staring. I ignored it for a moment, thinking he was checking out what aisle he needed, but he stayed. He didn't move. I shot a glance over to him and tried to work out why he stood there. The man was also clearly a Muslim. I would say around the age of 30. For a second, I figured he must be her father, but something didn't seem right. He was staring blankly at her. I turned to the little girl, then back to the man. I did this several times, and with no doubt in my mind, I knew he was watching her. If he was with her, surely he would have walked over to her or called her name. He was not her father, her uncle, her brother. I looked toward him again for a moment, and I could tell his eyes were so fixated on her that he hadn't noticed me staring at him. I looked away as not to stare too long, but it was bothering me. I could still see him in the corner of my eye. I need to intervene, I thought silently. Kira had been talking continuously at this point, but somewhere in the conversation, I had switched off. She tugged my arm, and I turned to her. Something had to be done. This girl's parents were nowhere in sight, and I knew I was the only person who could potentially stop whatever sick ideas this man had for this girl. I looked back at the sweets, but kept the little girl in the corner of my eye as I told Kira to be quiet, and I explained what was going on. She whispered,
"What do we do?"
I had been thinking while she panicked. Brave, but very naive 12-year-old me decided to go stand with the girl. "We are going to walk over to her. As we stand next to her, you keep your eyes on the man. Do not take them off of him, Kira. I am going to ask her where her parents are." With that said, we walked towards the girl, one of us at either side of her. My heart was racing for fear of what his intentions were. I tend to get very angry when I am afraid, and my fear was solely for this girl. I knelt down beside her and said, "Hello, where are your parents?" She looked at me puzzled. I realized now that we looked like the creeps, not him. "I'm not sure. They told me to grab what I wanted and then go find them." I looked at her face, so sweet, so innocent. I replied, "Would it be okay if we helped you find your parents?" I didn't want her to go find them alone, in case the man got to her before they did. "Yes, please," she replied. Kira never took her eyes off of the creep the entire time I was speaking to the little girl. She said he looked angry and sort of confused at what was going on, and he walked away just before we took her to find her parents. I took her hand and hurried her along as we searched a few aisles for her mother and father. It didn't take long until we found them. I was relieved as she ran over to them and placed her sweets in the trolley. "Thank you," she said. Her parents looked at us with concern, so I approached them quickly to explain why she just thanked us. I told them that a man had been watching their daughter intensely for the past 5 minutes, and I was worried because I couldn't see her parents. They thanked me many times before I left the shop. I remember how terrified the mother looked as I told her. She took my hand and thanked me again before we left. It's over, I thought. The little girl is safe, and I am so glad I took a detour. Me and Kara left the shop, and Kara decided she didn't want to go home yet, so insisted I come to her friend's house with her. "Not today. I really need to get home, otherwise my dad will start to worry." She nodded and set off in the opposite direction. I began walking home alone. I felt strange. Something in my gut was telling me to turn around. I walked through the car park and past the usual shops, and then I turned. He was behind me, merely yards away. As soon as I caught his eyes, I turned around and picked up the pace. My heart was pounding. I was only 12. I knew I couldn't outrun a grown man, and I was way too small to fight him. "Think!" I screamed in my head. I kept passing shop after shop. No one was around. It was roughly an hour after school ended by this point, and all of the school kids had been to the local shops and gone home, usually in large groups. The sweet shop, I thought to myself. At the top of this path I was on was a small sweet shop. Nearly all of the kids from school flocked there after school ended for their cheap sweets. I knew there was a security guard inside. He was always there. He watched out for the kids stealing sweets. If I can get to the shop before it closes, I'll be safe, I thought. Yes, it closed early on school days, as the only customers were us kids. I was hoping for dear life that the shutters weren't down. I knew if it was closed, I didn't stand a chance. My route home was simple, but not so much if you're being chased. After I passed that shop, I had to turn right under a bridge, then climb large stone stairs to walk over the bridge, to then walk up a large hill to get home. Not to mention, I had severe asthma that was made worse when I was panicked or nervous. I picked up as much pace as possible without running. I didn't want him to think I was aware that I was being followed. He was walking at a steady pace, but keeping his eyes glued to me. Suddenly, as I was about to reach the shop, I saw the security guard. He stepped out of the shop, just as I reached it. I scurried over to him and told him everything that was going on. I told him what happened in the supermarket and then that he was following me. I felt my heart pounding as the man slowly creeped closer. I have about half a mile to walk. Please? He cut me off. He looked angry.
Go now. Don't stop walking. I'll stop him and keep him here as long as I can. Don't look back. Just move as fast as you can.
I ran around the corner and heard the security guard say,
Stop.
I then speed walked as fast as my legs could carry me over the bridge. His voice faded as I walked further. I knew he wouldn't let him hurt me. I felt okay. That feeling in my stomach had gone. I was okay. I reached home with no problem. I never told my dad or grandparents, but like I said, I've always been cautious, and even if I put myself at risk, I'm glad I was able to help that little girl. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. I hope you enjoyed those 4 stories of women experiencing close calls. I'm still looking for paranormal stories for the month of October, so please send me any of your experiences with ghosts, imaginary friends that weren't so imaginary, shadow people, the Hat Man, anything like that, to creepymina@gmail.com. And of course, you remember that you must comment below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, share on your favorite social networking platform, follow me on Twitter as WorstNightmare6 for advance notice of all uploaded videos, and please do stay safe.